For nearly 3 decades, Alexander Lukashenko ruled Belarus with an iron fist, maintaining power through fear, propaganda, and the unwavering loyalty of his country's military and intelligence services. But in recent weeks, the signs of collapse have grown impossible to ignore. What was once considered one of Europe's most rigid dictatorships is now showing cracks from within, as the army, once the backbone of Lukashenko's regime, begins to turn hostile against him. This is not merely a political crisis. It is the slow implosion of a system that depended entirely on obedience and control. Reports have emerged from multiple Belarusian military bases suggesting that several officers have refused to follow presidential orders to suppress growing unrest across the country. At first, these whispers were dismissed as rumors, but soon videos began circulating online showing soldiers removing their insignia and declaring that they would no longer act against their own people. The spark for this mutiny reportedly came when Lukashenko ordered special forces to disperse demonstrators in Brest and Hrodna, where thousands of civilians had gathered to protest against worsening living conditions and food shortages. Instead of carrying out the crackdown, several units hesitated, and in some cases, outright disobeyed the order. For a man like Lukashenko, who has always viewed disobedience as treason, this was a sign that his control was slipping. The economic situation has played a huge role in this unrest. Belarus is facing its worst financial crisis in decades. Western sanctions have crippled its exports, foreign investors have fled, and the local currency has plummeted in value. Prices of everyday goods have doubled, wages have stagnated, and unemployment continues to rise. In many cities, people wait in long lines just to buy bread and milk. The once loyal middle class, teachers, doctors, and even police officers have grown disillusioned. In the countryside, farmers complain that fuel and fertilizer shortages have made it impossible to harvest their crops. It is this nationwide despair that has pushed many soldiers to question why they are defending a leader who has driven their families into poverty. According to insiders, Lukashenko's paranoia has reached new levels. He now reportedly moves between different presidential residences every few nights, fearing assassination attempts from within his own guard. His once tight circle of advisors has shrunk dramatically. Several longtime allies have either fled the country or been placed under house arrest. The head of internal security, a man known for his brutal tactics during the 2020 protests, is said to have vanished from public view. Meanwhile, Lukashenko continues to appear on state television, projecting confidence and promising that the enemies of Belarus will be crushed. But behind the scenes, his regime is fracturing. The relationship between Lukashenko and the Belarusian military was built on mutual benefit. He provided the generals with privileges, funding, and political protection, while they guaranteed his survival through loyalty. But now, many officers see that loyalty as a liability. In the wake of Russia's prolonged war in Ukraine, Belarusian soldiers have grown weary of being seen as Moscow's puppets. Some units stationed near the Ukrainian border are refusing to cooperate with Russian military advisors who were deployed to assist Belarusian defense operations. These advisors are now reportedly being withdrawn quietly as tensions rise between the two forces. One Belarusian colonel, speaking anonymously, stated, "We were told to protect our people, not to die for Putin or Lukashenko. Our loyalty is to Belarus, not to their politics." Protests are reigniting across major cities. What began as small gatherings over rising food prices has evolved into large, coordinated demonstrations calling for Lukashenko's resignation. Unlike previous movements, this new wave seems to have partial protection from within the armed forces. Soldiers are seen allowing protesters to pass through checkpoints peacefully. Some officers have even been caught on camera lowering their weapons in front of unarmed civilians. This quiet rebellion inside the military has emboldened ordinary citizens. For the first time in years, the people of Belarus believe that change is possible. Internationally, the collapse of Lukashenko's control is causing concern. Russia, his closest ally, has remained publicly silent, but is reportedly monitoring the situation with anxiety. Moscow cannot afford to lose Belarus, which serves as a crucial buffer state between Russia and NATO countries. If Lukashenko falls, it could open the door for a government less sympathetic to the Kremlin. Western nations, meanwhile, are cautiously optimistic. The European Union has expressed support for the democratic aspirations of the Belarusian people, but has avoided any direct interference, aware that an unstable Belarus could quickly spiral into chaos. The United States has issued warnings against any violent suppression of the uprising, calling for restraint from all sides. Inside Belarus, the situation grows more tense with each passing day. Power outages are spreading in rural areas, and shortages of essential medicines are being reported in hospitals. Internet access has been restricted once again as authorities attempt to control the flow of information. Yet, despite these crackdowns, videos and messages continue to leak, painting a picture of a regime on the verge of collapse. Eyewitnesses claim that military convoys have been spotted moving away from the capital, possibly to avoid being used in a last-ditch effort to suppress rebellion. Others report that Lukashenko has summoned Russian advisors for emergency consultations, though it remains unclear whether Moscow is willing to intervene militarily this time. The emotional toll on ordinary Belarusians is immense. Families of soldiers are terrified for their loved ones, unsure whether they will be forced to fight against their own citizens. Mothers weep in the streets, pleading with troops to protect the people, not the dictator. In many towns, local police officers have begun removing their badges, saying they will no longer serve the state, but the people. This symbolic defiance has sent shockwaves through the government. State television continues to broadcast images of Lukashenko smiling and shaking hands with factory workers, but behind the scenes, insiders admit that these are pre-recorded and heavily edited appearances meant to create the illusion of stability. Political analysts are calling this the final phase of Lukashenko's rule. Every authoritarian regime, they argue, eventually collapses when fear turns into defiance. The same military that once protected him is now questioning his legitimacy. The same people who once feared speaking his name now chant for his resignation in the streets. Even within his cabinet, fractures are visible. Reports suggest that the Prime Minister and several senior ministers have privately urged Lukashenko to negotiate a peaceful transition of power, a proposal he angrily rejected. He reportedly shouted, "I will die in this chair before I surrender." But power built on fear rarely ends peacefully. Intelligence sources claim that some generals are already in secret contact with opposition leaders, discussing potential steps for a caretaker government in the event that Lukashenko flees or is removed. A leaked memo allegedly circulating within the Defense Ministry warns of imminent internal disobedience and uncontrollable troop movements. Whether this is true or part of an information war remains unclear, but the panic within the regime is unmistakable. As night falls over Minsk, the city feels tense and uncertain. Sirens echo in the distance, armored vehicles patrol the main avenues, and the once proud presidential palace is surrounded by barricades. Yet despite the government's show of force, there is an unmistakable sense that the tide has turned. The fear that once defined Belarusian life is fading, replaced by anger, courage, and the hope for freedom. In the eyes of the protesters, Lukashenko is no longer a feared ruler. He is a desperate man, clinging to power he no longer possesses. The coming days will determine whether this crisis ends in a peaceful transition or descends into violence. But one thing is certain: the Belarusian people and much of their army have awakened from decades of silence. They are no longer willing to live under a regime that treats them as prisoners in their own country. As one soldier was heard saying before removing his uniform and joining the protesters, "We were told to obey orders, but now we are obeying our conscience." If Lukashenko cannot win back the loyalty of his army, his fall may be inevitable. What began as whispers of dissent has now become a roar of defiance echoing through the streets of Belarus. The world is watching as one of Europe's last dictators faces his reckoning. His regime, once unshakable, now trembles on the edge of collapse, and the army that once guarded his throne may soon be the force that ends his reign forever.